uitspraak dat u nu gaat horen is gebaseerd op een waar gebeurd verhaal. Het speelde zich een paar jaar geleden ergens in Duitsland af aan de Moezel. Een wandeling in een schitterend heuvellandschap samen met een niet nader te noemen vriendin. Ik zie een bordje hangen en zeg, hé, ze hebben hier een kastelenroute.
Wat? Een Charles Taylor-route?
Waarom zouden ze hier in Duitsland nou een route uitzetten met als thema de ex-president van Liberia?
Maar schatje, Charles Taylor is toch een filosoof?
Oh, niet dus.
Wel eens.
Nee, niet dus.
Echt wel?
Echt niet.
Jawel.
Niet waar.
Wel eens.
Nee hoor. Je maakt mij niet wijs dat iemand tegelijkertijd filosoof, president en misdadiger kan zijn?
En dan ook nog tijd over hebben om kastelen te bouwen. Om te voorkomen dat de rest van onze vakantie erg ongezellig zou worden, besloten we het toch maar op te zoeken op internet. En zo kwamen we uiteindelijk samen tot een compromis. En ontdekten we hoe het kwam dat Charles Taylor zo'n veelzijdig persoon was. We hadden allebei gelijk. Er zijn 2 Taylors.
We stelden ons voor dat beide heren samen een omvangrijk netwerk van kastelenroutes hadden uitgezet over de hele wereld.
Van Duitsland helemaal tot aan Liberia zeker.
Ja. En iedere keer dat we tijdens onze vervolg van de reis iets zagen dat leek op een kasteel, dachten wij,
zou de Charles Taylor-route hier misschien ook langslopen?
Oh.
Zoals u zult begrijpen, zijn wij, mede door deze ervaring die wij hadden, zeer vereerd dat wij vanavond Charles Taylor aan u mogen aankondigen.
Ja, en we zijn natuurlijk heel opgelucht dat we vanavond alleen de echte Charles Taylor digitaal gaan ontmoeten.
En hopelijk hoeven we voor onze valse beschuldigingen aan zijn adres niet te boeten.
Dankjewel.
We've sort of agreed that I'm going to sort of interview you for about 30 minutes. And then I'm going to give the audience over here a chance to pose questions to you. I know that there are 1 or 2 or probably 5 people over here already ready to fire questions at you. But
good.
Yeah, like I am. We had a talk about this earlier, or at least we had an email exchange. We're having a philosophy festival over here, and there's a theme inspired partly by the financial crisis. And in Dutch, we use words, the same words for both guilt and financial debt, and we use the same words for penance and for fine, financial fine. That is the theme of the Philosophy Week and the Philosophy Festival today. And I wanted to start with a couple of questions to you basically about the financial crisis, about penance, about guilt, etc., etc., etc. Let me check my notes, if you don't mind. So your work is about the stuff that keeps society together, right? The awareness that a society is more than just a joint venture, more than just economics, more than just people cooperating for mutual advantage. It's more than that. And the funny thing about the financial crisis at the moment is that it seems to eat away at that basis, at the economic basis of society. And while a society is more than money and more than economics, etc., it is the money that we are starting to distrust. We actually had a small banking crisis over here for a couple of days. People couldn't even get in their money. The banks. Anyway, my point.
In the Netherlands.
No, it's worse. As you know, money doesn't exist anymore, right? It's all bits and bytes in computer programs nowadays, and we had a software problem. Suddenly, half the country couldn't access their bank accounts anymore. Anyway, what I wanted to ask you is your theory. your work is all about the stuff that is more important, basically, than money only. And now, suddenly, that the certainty, the assurance, the safety of a sound economic basis is disappearing. Does a thing like that, and the effect that it has on societies, not just ours, but also in the US and in Canada and anywhere else, doesn't that incite you to sort of revise your views? To, well, give more consideration to the economic basis of life?
Well, I don't think that's a revision. You see, I think that part of the unspoken contract in our kind of democratic society is that economic activity is more or less usually for the benefit of everybody. It's for mutual benefit. And of course, there are theories that the very right-wing people have that you don't need any government intervention at all as long as people are signing contracts that they agree on both sides, that works out. But everybody knows that that's not really true. So the basis of the contract is that government will see that economic activity is carried on within limits so that it really does benefit everyone. Now, that is the principle that was totally violated by the financial sector, who were selling these junk bonds that they knew were junk bonds. And they, anyway, ought to have known that the whole thing would fall apart. But even before it fell apart, they were selling, as I say, junk bonds, so they're very much to the disadvantage of the people who were buying them. And it shows that this sector is not adequately regulated. But I think that we're touching here on an economic question, or we're touching here on a basic moral question, because I think that in a democratic society, we understand that the principle is that economic activity ought to be for the benefit of everyone. When I make money, I've got to make money in a way that doesn't damage you. I mean, I ought to make money in a way that doesn't send a lot of pollution into the air that everybody has to breathe. I ought to make money in a way that doesn't bankrupt you and so on. And that, I think, is something that was really violated by the financial crisis, by the behavior that caused the financial crisis.
When we talk about the financial crisis, at least in our country, but I get the impression it's all over the globe. When we talk about the financial crisis, we tend to do so at the moment in terms of classic virtues, like blame, like guilt. We tend to address the bankers rather than the banks, the individuals rather than the institutions. Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't do that. Technical flaw, awfully sorry. 21st century apparatus is wasted on me. Anyway, is talking about the financial crisis in such personal terms, in terms of basically virtue ethics, like I said, penance, trust, stuff like that. Is that the right language? Is that the right discourse, or are we sort of deceiving ourselves? Are we making ourselves believe that it is really individuals who can change anything? How important are individuals?
No, I think that sometimes it's important not to look at the individuals, but look at structures in the system. But at other times, you can clearly attribute some terrible disaster to individuals that have made certain decisions. Now, this is also the case for the most part of the financial crisis. Not all of it. Some of it came from, let's say, for instance, housing booms in, excuse me, in the United States and in Spain, where nobody is really at fault there. People got to get into these bubbles because everybody gets very excited. I'm going to sell my house for much more than I bought it for, and the result is a catastrophe. So you can't pinpoint the blame there. But the really dangerous thing that happened on top of those bubbles was the introduction of all these financial instruments that were extremely dubious and in some cases really fraudulent. And some people knew they were doing that, and they did it, and they fought for years to deregulate so that they could do it. And those people ought to be called to account, particularly when they're now taking huge bonuses for having wrecked the whole financial system of the, world economy.
Yeah, the same over here, the same over here. Yeah. Yeah. And who gets the bonus? Not me. Moving on a bit. Slowly moving in the direction of your real work. Michael Walzer, your colleague. In the 1970s and in the 1980s, he suggested that there were different public spheres, right? What he called the spheres of justice. There's the economy, there's politics, and each of those spheres, I'm explaining this also for the audience who, half of them probably haven't read Michael Walzer, and they need a little bit of subtitling. Michael Walzer argued that the society is made up of different spheres of justice. Each sphere is a sphere in which a good is distributed. The economy, politics determines who has access to a society, love, etc., etc. And Michael Walzer was quite worried about the risk that the economy was slowly trying to take over, not just in discourse but also in actual fact, slowly trying to take over the reins in all these other social spheres, spheres of justice. And what seems to be happening at the moment is that when we talk about the financial crisis, I'm now turning to you again, when we talk about the financial crisis, again, it seems that we have it's a kind of reaction to the slow takeover of society by the economy. We are now suddenly blaming bankers and the economy, etc., etc. I should probably ask this of Michael Walzer as well, but would you say that this is a kind of a turn in history, a move away from the economy overpowering the rest of society and the economy being pushed back in its proper corner, its proper place?
Yeah. I think that's really one of the big issues here, because if we go back from the immediate question of who did what in the financial crisis, and we ask why were they able to do that, why were they deregulated? And because they were regulated earlier, you know, as a result of the 1930s, there were very severe regulations put in after the Second World War in all these societies, certainly in the United States, and then they were deregulated in the period in the United States after Reagan, right? Why were they deregulated? Well, this is partly shows the power of big money to lean on or buy or influence politicians, to lean on or buy or influence media, so that people don't see that they are exercising irresponsible power. And I think that's a clear case of what Michael Walzer is against, that you becoming successful economically shouldn't give you disproportionate political power. Right? You should get disproportionate political power because you get voted for by lots of people. Then you have more power than your neighbor because you're the prime minister and you got all the votes, but not because you have immense economic resources at your disposal. And this is really a very serious thing. I think that all our Western democracies are really under threat by the growth of the power of money, the power of property. And, you know, because we base on a principle of equality of citizenship, which is being violated all the time.
Okay. Then I think we've paid enough respect to the theme of the evening, and we can move on to your real work, or at least some of your real work. For some of the people in the audience know this. You've been at it for 60 years by now. You have an impressive list of publications, and the topics that we can talk about are very, very limited. But you're best known, at least in the Netherlands, I think, for your work on community, tolerance, recognition, multiculturalism, etc., etc., which is, of course, incredibly topical because it's the hottest topic, well, except for the financial crisis, but almost the hottest topic in politics these days and in society these days. And perhaps the best way to introduce you to the audience over here is if I ask you to define yourself. We know from the 1980s communitarianism, and you're often associated with communitarianism. We know from the 1990s and the noughties, multiculturalism. You're also associated with multiculturalism. What are you? Are you a communitarian? Are you a multiculturalist? Or both? And are the two compatible?
Yeah. Well, I think let's define terms. See, communitarianism is used in two completely different ways. One is in the United States, for instance, amitazione and the communitarian movement, I'm very much with them. They want us to, they're saying liberal society is very often more concerned with freedom of individuals than it is with their responsibilities, right? So we have to redress the imbalance, but that means we have to see the whole society as a community and have some responsibility to that community. Now, there's another sense where it's playing up the importance of different ethnic or cultural communities within a society. That's a totally different sense. Now, I'm totally a communitarian in Ezione's sense. I think that we need to address the balance. We need more, if you like, what used to be called Republican virtues. But when it comes to cultural communities, well, it's complicated because I don't know exactly what people mean when they say they're communitarians there. So let's shift to the other term, multiculturalism. And I think that is what could carry what I would like to see there. And there, multiculturalism really means that it's an attempt by Western societies to diversify what they consider to be the cultural common basis of their democratic society. Every democratic society needs certain common bases, they need certain principles, democracy, human rights, and so on. But the way things normally are, people living together in the same ethnic group for many decades or centuries, people think, well, normally to be a German citizen, you have to be German ethnic. To be Québécois, very often people think you have to be Québécois, French extraction in Quebec, and so on. And multiculturalism is saying that we're entering an era where we can't do that anymore because our societies are diversifying so greatly. Partly by migration, but partly by the fact that lots of different groups are coming out of the closet that used to accept second-class citizenship, but they don't anymore. Of course, women, for the last 30, 40 years have been doing exactly that, except saying we don't accept second-class citizenship anymore. And the message of multiculturalism is we have to think how to diversify our understanding of what it is to be a normal Canadian, a normal citizen of the Netherlands, a normal citizen of Germany, and it has to go beyond being, born of family living in the Netherlands for the last 2,000 years. It has to go beyond that.
Yeah, I'm thinking I wasn't born here. Yeah, I was born here, but not for... My ancestors haven't lived here for 1,000 years. There is, of course, a serious difference between Canada and countries like the Netherlands and Germany. Yours is a country of immigration. And that means that identities, even those of what you would call cultures, or what we could call cultures for the moment, are different from ours. In our context, communitarianism, for example, would probably be equated with nationalism. In the Canadian context, I don't know. It's easier to deny the existence of something unifying other than a republic, right? Do you see that, do you feel, well, it's a bad word, but let's stick to do you feel. Do you feel that there really must be a difference between the meaning of culture and multiculturalism in a Canadian or an American context on the one hand, and a typically European context on the other hand, where we haven't had much experience with emigration so far, and immigration?
Yeah, I think there is a big difference. I mean, I've been very interested in this, and I think there's a very big difference. Difference is about 80 years. You see, you've said it. We've been an immigration society for a long, long, long time. And we didn't behave very well at the beginning. We were, I can remember where let's divide English and French, where the normal idea of an English Canadian was somebody whose ancestors came from the British Isles in Canada. That was like that up to the Second World War. It was like that even up till a couple of decades after the Second World War. And then it got to a point where the numbers just made no sense of this anymore. The number of people who were English Canadians, in a sense, Canadian citizens speaking English as their language, whose parents came from Eastern Europe and then later on from India and China, and so got so great that it just didn't make sense anymore to think of the the sort of normative Canadian as from the British Isles, or normative, and the same parallel in Quebec, to think of the normative Québécois as having ancestors in Normandy in the 17th century. I think you're 80 years behind because you didn't face the situation. I mean, most of you. Netherlands is different because, like the British, you had a lot of people from your empire that came earlier. But you know, for many European countries, they didn't really become immigration societies. They didn't know they were becoming. In Germany, they spoke of Gastarbeit because they thought people would go home, right? We could have told them, no, they won't. You know, they've made the experience now as people are step more. So you have to do something to get rid of, I think, older ideas that the normative citizen of the Netherlands comes from a certain set of cultural backgrounds, and redefine it. It doesn't mean redefining the citizenship to take no account of what's specific to the Netherlands, because all of our democracy are particular historical projects in erecting and sustaining democracy, and they're all different. You have your political traditions that are from ours. You have this pillarization, for instance. You have all sorts of things that you have your kind of federation. You know, the Netherlands pioneered in the Western world the idea of federation in a certain sense.
People over here love to hear that, of course. Local pride.
No, we couldn't exist as a federal society. So, you know, we bow to your tremendous legacy here, and so that's part of what you're not going to lose that. But the idea that the citizen should be of a certain culture has to be gone beyond.
Can I interrupt you for a moment? I get the impression that the sound is failing. Is that correct? Yeah. It may be a problem in the connection. We'll find out in a couple of moments. We may have to cut the connection and call you again, but we'll find out in a couple of moments. Long live bits and bytes, you know. Your talk is cut in bits and bytes, and it returns in different order. You don't want to know that. Okay. I'll come back to our typically Dutch context in a couple of moments, but right now I'd like to stick to a slightly more abstract level of discussion for just a couple of minutes, and it's got to do with unity in society, unity versus multiculturalism. If you defend a view of society in which there is room for different cultures, for multiculturalism, regardless of how we define cultures, can there still be something like a society, an overarching society, that means more than just a kind of political agreement to tolerate each other and or cooperate on a purely tactical basis? Can society mean more than just the accidental union of cultures?
Oh, I think it can and it must. The thing is that democratic societies, very strong set of moral and political principles. To be a democratic society means that democracy itself, ruled by the people, is one of our basic principles. And of course, equality is one of our basic principles. And the whole gamut of the rights, human rights that we've been developing in various charters are part of our basic principles. And these we can't derogate from. I mean, these different democratic societies are different historical projects in erecting societies on these principles. And that's what binds us together. Now, how much can we see people who come from another culture but are willing to subscribe to this project? How easily can we see them as compatriots, as citizens together with us on the same level as us? Or do we always feel certain distance, a certain suspicion, and so on? That's the issue of multiculturalism. But when you diversify the cultural basis of your citizenship, you still have this very powerful set of principles. And a history that you're continuing, which is not just anybody's history, but the history of this particular society, And that's something, you know, that's a lot to bind people together.
So it is imaginable that there are cultures, groups in a society that don't really feel at home and keep not feeling at home. And you'd still, consider them part of a society?
No, that's a very, very big problem. Yeah. I mean, if there are, I mean, it's just like, you know, criminals are part of the society, they're citizens, but they are really, you know, pulling against it and trying to destroy it. So if you have a group that, for instance, would always take a firm position that they just don't accept democracy, they don't accept equality and so on, this is something very, very, you know, virtually in the long run impossible to integrate into our kind of society. But here I think something else intervenes. I think that you can see, if you look over the whole range of rich, Western, democratic, liberal societies, that they have a tremendous attractive power. Why do people want to come here, right? Come there to you and come here to us. You know, when we ran this commission in Quebec, we asked these various immigrants, why did you come here? And there were two reasons that they all said. One was freedom, and the second was, I want my children to have a better chance in life than I could have back in, be it Algeria or whatever. Right? And I think the same thing would probably come if you asked immigrants into the Netherlands. Why did you come here? I think that
absolutely the same arguments. Yeah, absolutely the same reasons.
I think that the sense of anger and alienation that sometimes arises among immigrants arises because they feel that they are not being properly integrated. I mean, things like the riots in the, you know, the banlieue parisienne, remember in 2005, what these kids have from the migrant, what the anger is that they feel they're discriminated against, they can't get jobs and so on. If that happens, then you get real anger. You know, on our case, it's not our immigrants, but it's our Aboriginals that very often are very angry with us and feel that they're being kept in kind of ghettos and not being given a chance. And, you know, that there's some truth in that. And it's very hard to overcome this if this kind of alienation arises. But I don't think any group, any sizable group of people comes with the idea we're going to change the society and not make it democratic. No, the vast majority of them come because they want to benefit from a democratic, open, liberal, rich society. And the last thing they want to do is upset the apple cart. So I really think that a lot of the alienation in a lot of European society is really to be put at the foot of the lack of integration, lack of good politics of integration. I can give you examples concerning Germany. I don't know the Netherlands as well. I mean, not having taken certain just basic steps to integrate immigrant children, like making sure they learn the language properly, making sure they go to maternelle, how you say that in English or Dutch, you know, what you go to, kindergarten, and so on. Not having taken these steps, produced a sense of they don't want us here, we're not being accepted, and then you get these identity reactions of we're different, you know, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Identity, that's just where I wanted to go. I'm going totally off script here now. I'm trying to get a feeling for what you mean by culture. In your work, I see culture as referring to ethnic groups and to religions. And now I'm trying to, well, I'm going to try to get you to broaden the concept even more. Would you say that, say, homosexuals are a culture? Is that a culture? And if it is, then the next question would probably be, what do we do if two cultures clash? Yeah. We have examples of that over here.
You have a very good point there, that the word culture, which we used in multiculturalism for the original cases, which for us were people from, you know, let's say Poland and Italy as against coming from Britain, the principle behind recognizing them goes wider than that, and it touches things like identity. So if you take, we could define that, we may go over half an hour, but anyway, what people feel is very central to the kind of human being they are. And for a lot of homosexuals, this is their orientation is central to their identity. And I think that we have an obligation in a liberal democratic society to treat these people on an equal foot with all others, that the differences, these kind of differences of identity don't create for you massive differences of privilege or possibility and so on. So things like gay marriage, I think, are inevitable consequence of our particular set of principles and way of life, and the sooner and faster, and is that where's that noise
coming? It's a fire alarm somewhere. We're probably heating up. It's not really a heated debate, is it? I mean, it's a friendly conversation. Sorry for the interruption. Shall I move on?
Yes.
I have a kind of follow-up, and I noticed that in your latest work you've embraced the term I have to check this. It is not my native language, okay? Ecumenism, right? Ecumenie. Ecumenism. Something like that, right? Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, that's got you. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a new word for me. Anyway, the friendly exchange of ideas, right? You put a Catholic and a Protestant together in a room, and they try to find out why they feel so appealed by their own religion, and etc. Taking an interest in each other, right? A conversation on which a good relation between different cultures or religions or groups, etc., is based. And ecumenism, is that the way you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I should
I'm
have known
not sure. You gave me all dubious now. I don't know how to speak my own language. But anyway, we know what we're.
Awfully sorry. The point is, you're talking about liberal democracy, etc. But you have a Catholic background, right? As do many of the people over here, and and for many of them, religion is still a relevant category. But you said somewhere that even the atheist could be involved in a discourse like this, and that set me wondering: what would an atheist have to gain from a discussion like that? Why would he be interested in what appeals in Catholicism for you? Why would he be? What is at stake for him? What would he gain?
Well, I think that a lot of atheists would say that they can't see what they would gain, but I think that they're missing something very important about human beings, which is that they have very different, very deep convictions about what makes life worthwhile, and that nobody has the whole truth about this, that nobody has a complete corner on all the human possibilities, and that the only way to get a little bit broader and to see other angles on life and other possibilities is to sit down with people and say to them, well, now what makes, what excites you about whatever it is that you believe in. Now, this really is a kind of shibboleth, I think you can say that separates, to a certain extent, the sheep from the goats. Because if my position in life is really mainly an angry one of negating someone else, right? If I'm a Christian that really hates atheists, or if I'm Dawkins, an atheist that really hates Christians, of course, I won't want to sit down and talk about this. But then that shows that there's something really very wrong with my whole stance towards life. And not only that it blocks certain communications, but I haven't really understood what it is to be a human being, and what it is to have to learn as a human being, and what it is to have to grow as a human being. Right? I've just missed a whole lot of features that are essential to what it is to be a human being. But if you haven't, then you could, whatever you are, respond to that invitation positively. And that's these conversations which I've had are really some of the most rewarding of my life, and I think of my interlocutors' life.
Most of us would probably agree, but can I press you on this? Because it seems that an attitude like this, an open attitude, a conversational attitude, seems to be required for groups to coexist peacefully, and more than just on a level of mere toleration. So you require that, but isn't that a little bit like wishful thinking in political terms?
Oh yeah.
In that it takes just one worm in the apple to spoil the whole lot, right? It takes just one to start a conflict.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you want to, let me use another term to say the same thing. As a universal prescription, it's somewhat utopian, we would say, right? At the moment, there are lots of groups that are mobilized in the world today with anger and hate and the sense of threat by other groups. Think of Pakistan today, and what's happening in Burma, and so on and so on. So that's very, very utopian. But the point about utopias is that, if they're really valid utopias, you try to realize them to the extent that you can. And instead of doing exactly like the worst conflict zones of the world, if we in our societies could move a bit beyond this and have that kind of conversation, it would push things just a little bit farther ahead. So it's definitely utopian, but it's a good, valid utopia, and I intend to live it as much as I can.
Okay, cool. I've had a quick look at at my clock, and I slowly have to give the audience a chance to pose questions to you. Some of the people over here are not that fluent in English, and I'll have to give you all the questions myself once more. If any of you have questions in Dutch, please feel free to pose them in Dutch. I'll try to translate them. And I know we have at least one question over there. Exactly. I promised you a chance for the first question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Taylor, so far. My name is Arthur Zijlstra. I'd like to come back to the point of departure of our conversation tonight, which was about the possible causes of the economic crisis.
Can you hear him, by the way?
I vaguely, but I couldn't grasp it.
I'll give you the gist after each sentence. He wants to return to the topic with which he started, the economic crisis, yes?
So in your analysis of modernity and modernization, you speak about economy as a system, as an objective system without collective actors.
Okay, so you speak about the economy in your work as a system without individual actors, right? Good summary?
And even without collective
and
actors.
Even without...
So it's one of the social imaginaries of modernity, as you call it.
It is one of the social imaginaries of modernity. He's really quoting you now, right? He's got the text ready.
But now my question is, how is it then possible, given this objectified system, how is it possible that humans are still responsible for it? So the issue of guilt and shame and repentance, how is that?
Okay.
So that connects to one of the questions of Mr. Wissenburg.
If the economy is a kind of objective system, if there is no human face to it, how then can humans be held responsible, as you seem to have done, as I've sort of lured you into saying, how can humans still be responsible for what happens in the economy? If it's like a system, blind and like a machine, etc.
Yeah, but I don't think that's what the social imaginary is. I mean, for one thing, the economy is just one way that we're all linked together in society, in our understanding and imaginary of that, right? We're also linked together politically, we're all linked together socially, we're linked together culturally, and so on. So we have individuals who, insofar as they're linked by the economy, yeah, there are certain objective, impersonal forces operating. But then we have, as citizens, certain responsibilities. I get back to the point we were making earlier, right? That if you just let the economy run without any attempt to regulate it, then we're falling down on extremely important obligations that we have as human beings, as citizens, right? So I don't think that you see it in the real world. There is such a thing as a system just running on. There are systems which, in our analytic grasp of them, we see as automatic systems, but they're embedded in other systems, like political systems, where they can be and should be regulated.
Okay. I'll look around. Yep. You're first. Yes, yeah.
My question is, with respect to the financial crisis, you talked about the need of more regulation, and I totally agree with that. But how do you relate the need for more regulation to intrinsic motivation? Because one of the first things that I noticed when I got here in the conference room, and it's been more than 10 years now, since I was a student, is that all over there are these signs that you're not allowed to eat and drink here. But I don't think that, well, the people notice. So isn't this just symbolic regulation? And
okay.
How does it relate to intrinsic motivation?
Okay. The question started with the economic crisis, but it has a deeper philosophical foundation. Started with the financial crisis. You said we need more regulation. Well, this is oversimplifying your answer a little bit, but the question is, if you want more regulation, how does that relate to intrinsic motivation? If you have more rules like no smoking over here or no eating, etc., etc., those rules will only work if people feel intrinsically motivated to follow them. Or do they? So, in other words, what's the role of intrinsic motivation in regulation? First in regulation for financial markets, but then probably also in life on a whole.
Yeah, well, I think that there are lots of different motivations that have to come together. I mean, these people that you're regulating more than you did last week, let's say, may feel I'm being put upon, I'm being forced to do things I don't want to do. You know, we have to split banks up between commercial banks and banks that just take deposits and so on. They'll feel our opportunities are being restricted. But the motivation can also be, in some cases, that this is what the society needs. This is what we need in order to have an economy that doesn't do tremendous damage to everybody. So you can sometimes appeal to people's sense of belonging to a political community where the common good requires that we take this step. The same can be said for people who are told that they can't smoke. I mean, I know some people will feel that this is awful, I'd like to be able to smoke here and so on, but when people understand what's at stake, very often they come to accept this to some degree. And I think that's why, for instance, anti-smoking regulation has become more and more widely accepted, even by people who are totally hooked on tobacco.
Well, I'm going to continue the question a little bit in a different way. The funny thing is that apparently we all feel that bankers are worse addicts than smokers. In the sense that smokers have sort of learned, have been conditioned to no longer smoke where there's a sign where it's prohibited. But bankers, give them a rule and they'll just find a new way to move about, find the loopholes, etc., etc. Are bankers really fit for intrinsic motivation?
Well, there's a big problem, you see, that's the problem of power, isn't it? If you have a lot of money and a lot of economic power, you can very often, it's a real possibility that you can get around important regulations, right? If I'm a smoker and I walk into the restaurant, I'm going to be thrown out, and there's not going to be any way I can get around that. But if I have immense political clout because of the money, and I can influence public opinion through newspapers and through think tanks and so on, there's a very great temptation. You're right. When people have this kind of power, the temptation is definitely there. And what's one of the things we have to do is reduce that kind of power.
So they wouldn't be the kind of people who participate in a ecumenical discourse.
I mean, they aren't necessarily worse than the rest of us. It's just that they have terrible temptations. Right? If I could,
okay,
I could get away with income tax.
Okay, let me check. Were there questions anywhere? Damn difficult to see over here. Yeah. Okay, yes, over there. The microphone's on its way.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, I'm Ali. I'm born as a Muslim, and I can call it kind of indoctrinated. And my question is, you are religious, but I believe there's one God at the end. And I want to know why I should pick a religion, or can I just believe in God and my morals can be good too as somebody who follows a religion?
So your question is, do I have to choose a religion?
Yes.
Or is believing in a God enough?
Yeah,
and following my own path?
Because at the end I believe there's only one God who created humankind.
Perhaps you should come over here. It has to be the last question. Come on over here. I'll give you a chance to talk to Charles Taylor directly. It's going to be the last question. We're running out of time. But this is a complicated one. And I think it deserves a complicated answer and a little bit of attention. I'm going to pass on the mic for a moment.
Ja.
Zal ik hem opzetten? Nee. Ja.
Talk to the mic.
Ja. Door allebei? Ja. Hi. I'm Ali. I'm born as a Muslim, and I think I'm kind of indoctrinated with religion. Although I know my parents want for me to have a good future and stuff. My question is, you are religious, but why should I choose for a particular religion? Because I believe there's only one God, and I believe in God, but I don't know why I should pick one religion, because there's so many religion and so many thoughts, and what you said, you know, there's not a truth. So that's my question. Why should I choose a religion?
Well, maybe you don't have to. I mean, it depends what you mean by a religion. We'd have to have a longer talk about this, but you know, if you have a sense that there is God, right, and you have a sense that God is asking certain things from you, and you have a sense that you want to be or ought to be closer to God than you are now, and you have to ask yourself how to do that, and I mean, then some things will come to you as obvious ways of doing that. It can be praying 5 times a day if you're a Muslim, for instance, and you know, paying zakat and so on. So you have to be at a certain point moved to some kind of practice, and as against just sitting there thinking, I think there's a God and that's all I need to do. Then you don't need a religion. That's not. But if you want to go farther in your religion, know more about God, get closer to God, or however you want to put it, then certain practices are going to just appear to you to be the ones to follow, and that will be some kind of religion. It mightn't be one that you have more or less invented. It might be one that's isn't part of the accepted list, Islam, Christianity, etc., etc. But that'll be your religion. I mean, sum it all up. If you believe in God, unless you just want to keep it as a kind of thought in your head, but if you want to move forward on it, you need some set of practices that appear to you to be bringing you closer to God, and that's a religion. What's a religion except a set of those practices? Yeah,
I do agree, but I have one more question then. If I choose a religion, I think that humankind is incapable to live together. So if I choose a religion, I'm kind of scared that religion goes along with war and terrorism and etc. etc. So isn't that kind of danger of choosing a religion?
Well, only if you buy the idea that the religion you choose has to put you in opposition to everyone else. See, I mean, I think that a lot of us in the West are suffering from the idea that to be a Muslim is to be in favor of violence and so on. And a lot of people are saying that kind of very Islamophobic nonsense. I know lots and lots and lots of Muslims whom I sit down and talk to and have exactly the kind of exchange I described earlier, and we both immensely benefited from that. If that's your kind of Islam, you're not making the world more violent by being a Muslim. On the contrary, you're scaling down some of the violence. What the world really needs is a lot of Muslims who don't agree with this kind of violence to stand up and say, that's not Islam. What we are practicing is Islam. And I just know, all my life I've known just great number of Muslims of that kind. I've formed my understanding of the world in conversation with them. And so I just can't see this as being a road to violence.
Okay, good. Thank you for your time.
Okay.
Have a good night.
You.
I hope you could pick up some of the applause. We have to end the conversation right now. We're overdue, in fact. I'd like to thank you very, very much for the interview. Pity you couldn't be here. Otherwise, we would have been talking for another 5 hours, probably. I'd also like to thank the audience for being so patient. A conversation via Skype is always quite tiring and technically quite difficult. Thank you all very much for being here. And thank you all also very much. And
thank you.
Hope to see you again one day. Bye-bye. I would have shown it to you, but I can't. Yeah.